Again, good morning, everyone. As I mentioned before, my name's Mark Lawton from RISC IT Solutions. So I'll be running the first half of the session, and then Mike will be picking up and talking in more detail around Teams Link and the product that Wavenet, portfolio that Wavenet deliver. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about who we are, just a couple of minutes. And again, apologies for those of you that are already customers of ours or have been on one of my previous sessions. You'll have seen some of this before. So if you've seen it before, then by all means, grab a coffee. But I'll just quickly run through who RISC are. So we're a Microsoft-focused gold partner, primarily involved in security, what we call security, productivity, and agility. So cloud services, primarily Microsoft-based. So Office 365 is obviously a big part of what we do. And Teams, as part of the Office 365 portfolio, is clearly a big part of what we're doing and where a lot of interest from both our existing and our new customers is concerned. We work with a number of other partners as well that complement what we do with Microsoft and Wavenet, or Via as they were and now part of Wavenet. Mike will talk in a bit more detail about themselves, but they're a key partner of ours, and they provide some of the additional services, particularly over and above Teams, that enable us to light up Teams with things like telephony, so voice, contact center, call recording as well now. And again, Mike will cover that in a bit more detail as we go through. Redstore are another key partner of ours, and they're primarily involved around business continuity and disaster recovery. And then we work with some of the key partners as well. But obviously what I'm talking about today is primarily around Microsoft and Wavenet. So through these boardroom briefing sessions, and this is the third sort of subject that we've been covering. So we've been talking about security, we've been talking about managing your data in an on-demand world, and then we've also now talking more about productivity. And I think for those of you that are in the IT roles, so IT managers, IT directors, you'll understand this dilemma of how IT has evolved from how it was probably 5 years ago, something like that, where everything was nicely contained within a ring-fenced environment and secured through a firewall. I think I do like this slide, and I'm not going to take credit for it because it's a Microsoft slide, but where we are today is you've got people, we've got devices, we've got applications everywhere, basically. So it's important to think about how you secure that. Is the downside. It's a dilemma of the more productive and the more you give people the ability to work from anywhere, obviously the more impact that has on security. So we talk a lot about both sides of that coin, if that makes sense. So today we're going to be focused around the benefits and the upside of this kind of environment, which is that as end users that we all are, that this kind of environment gives the ability to work from anywhere using any device at any time, basically. And obviously I'll talk a little bit about the current environment with COVID and the forced flexible working, home working environment. And obviously Teams there, little logo there on the top right is a key part of that, and it is one of the solutions. And clearly, being part of Office 365, it's an important solution for most of our customers at the moment. So, and again, if you've been on one of my sessions, you'll have seen this before, so we'll skip through this quite quickly. But the photo on the left was back from February, so I'm just thinking back, only as far as February, before certainly COVID kicked in the UK and Europe. Even then, Microsoft were pushing Teams hard in terms of advertising in places like Euston Station, advertising on the TV with videos, pushing the benefits of Teams to everybody. Obviously, they didn't know at that time just how the world was going to change in the next few months, and what we've seen now. This first press screenshot is from March. The second one is from April, and certainly if you look at the press from April, Microsoft saw a massive leap in Teams usage, as it says there, 70% usage, up to 75 million users per day. As always with Microsoft, as you'd expect, the numbers are huge. The number of users they have is huge, but even for them, the growth and the impact they saw on Teams with people being forced to work from home primarily was massive, and that's obviously continued. I mean, it's peaked in terms of the increased demand, but now I think everybody, whether you're using Teams or whether you're using something else to work remotely, everybody has had to get used to using these tools. And Microsoft themselves mentioned a figure of they saw what they predicted to happen over the next 2 years in terms of digital adoption happened in 2 months. So what they've seen is the demand condensed down into a 2-month period. And I think we can all sympathise with that from what we've seen ourselves. And the BBC asked a good question there: will we ever go back to the office? And funnily enough, we were talking about this morning before you all came on the call. Will we go back to working in the way that we did before? Probably not. Certainly not completely. I think we'll, certainly from our point of view, we'll end up with a mix of home workers, part-time office workers, and I think just having that flexibility to be as effective from wherever you are is really important, and Teams can help you do that. And then finally, and just there's been plenty of press around other tools that can help you, whether that's from a business point of view or a personal point of view. Things like Facebook and Zoom. Certainly for the consumers, keeping people sane and keeping people in touch at home are important. But do they work in a corporate, in a business environment? That's a good question, and hopefully one I can answer as we go through. So very quickly, why Teams? And again, with the benefit of those that have been on the end user quick start training sessions we've been running, I'll whiz through this quickly. Certainly Microsoft are trying to take us in a direction where Teams becomes the place that we all go to get work done. So currently, probably most of us live in Outlook, or we certainly did. I think the intention is that Teams becomes that place where people get all of their work done, so productivity. So it encompasses a lot of the tools that are already there. So Skype for Business, SharePoint Online, Outlook, Yammer, and then things like document collaboration within Office 365 is all built in as part of Teams. And just going back to the conversation there about Zoom and other video tools like WebEx is a great example that lots of companies are already been using in anger. Then how does Teams compare to those, and where does it fit in with products like Zoom and WebEx? And I think the fundamental answer to that is Teams is much more than just a video collaboration tool. It's a platform. It's it's a collaboration tool. It's a document collaboration. It will be the one place that people go to work. So I think the short answer is yes. Some of the features that you can get in Zoom around this, number of video feeds, for example, Teams isn't quite there yet, but the rate of development that Microsoft are putting into Teams, you're seeing things coming down the roadmap that are plugging some of these gaps, and I'll cover the roadmap towards the end. And for those of you that are new to Teams or not really using it in anger yet, what is it? So as well as the ability to work together with people within teams and channels, it's also what they call a hub for teamwork. So at its basic level, you've got one-to-one and group chat, which is built into the product. You've got powerful online meetings, which is what we're using at the moment. So the Teams meetings takes everything that you could do previously in Skype for Business, but makes it better. Enterprise calling in voice, which is the element we're going to focus on this morning, which is where Wavenet come in to the Teams story. And then also there are a number of, as well as having built-in apps from Microsoft, you've got thousands of third-party apps as well that you can build into Teams. So effectively, certainly if Microsoft have their way, potentially you never have to leave the Teams app to get your work done. So products like even Zoom itself and WebEx you can bolt those apps into Teams and work in that way. So likewise, and I think back to the comparison with Zoom and WebEx is Teams is part of Office 365. It's secured in the same way. It's single sign-on, so you don't have to worry about it as a separate app. So it's part of your overall Office 365 strategy. And just before I sort of hand over to Mike to do his session, just to kind of summarize that the key thing we're going to talk about today, as I say, is the ability to have that calling, chat, and meetings and everything else within a single app. So you see there, and we'll talk about this in more detail, you'll see that dialing pad. So that ability to enable Teams with the ability to call out to phone numbers, to receive calls, to transfer calls, to act for Teams to act in the same way that a traditional telephone system acts, but obviously with all of the other stuff that comes with Teams is a key part of what we're going to talk about today. So it's all about single platform, single solution, same look and feel, but actually enabling Teams to deliver this single unified communications solution. So I'm going to shut up for a minute. I'm going to hand over to Mike now, so he can do his bit. So that was my sort of intro session. Any questions before we hand over to Mike, Kirsty? I'll let you come off mute for a second.
Thank you. No one's asked any questions in the chat.
Okay. Mike, hopefully you're there.
Perfect. Yeah. I haven't left.
That's a good start. I probably
Yeah.
need to stop sharing and let you take control. Actually, I just need to make sure I've made you presenter. Just bear with me a second. Or just try. You should be okay, shouldn't you? Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect.
Thank you for that, Mark. You guys can see my screen okay? Does that come through?
All good, yeah.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So, thanks for the introduction, Mark. I guess it's just a starting point, a little bit of background on myself and who I am. So as Mark took a punt at the surname, my name's Mike Korkidakis, and I'm the channel manager here at Wavenet. My roles and responsibility within Wavenet are working with key partners like RISC to assist them in delivering our Teams Telephony product and Microsoft Telephony. I myself have a background that spans about 15 plus years across 3 different countries in the telecommunication space. So all various types of, VoIP platforms, UCaaS platforms, all various different types of telecommunication services. My experience varies. The last couple of years has just seen a primary focus on the Microsoft telephony space, anywhere from starting with sort of Communicator to Link to Skype for Business, and now where we've transitioned to Microsoft Teams. I just want to cover a few things today. As a starting point, I don't want to duplicate sort of any of Mark's slides as well, so there might be a few that I sort of skip because I want to get into some of the actual live demonstration bits. But I'll just start sort of running through this, and if there's any questions as I go, feel free to fire away. So like Mark did as well, just a little bit of background on Wavenet. Similar to RISC, we've been in our sort of specialty field for the last 2 decades. Both organizations have sort of 20 plus years experience. Our primary focus has always been in that sort of networking, connectivity, unified comms and voice space. That's where a lot of our sort of key expertise comes from, and that's how we've obviously developed the platform that we've developed. Mark did mention sort of VIA, part of the Wavenet group. So Wavenet actually acquisitioned an organization called VIA at the beginning of this year. I came from the VIA world. What VIA did is worked alongside sort of in conjunction with Microsoft and their sort of API releases to develop the platform in which we've now developed. And that's what I want to take you guys through today, which is our Teams Link product. So as a starting point, the question might be kind of what is Teams Link? So as Mark's already mentioned, and we've already talked about Microsoft Teams, what we want to focus on today, and what my bit is to focus on, is the ability to actually deliver and enable external voice calling from within your Microsoft Teams environment. So for any of those organizations that have adopted Teams already internally, and they're using it for your internal collaboration, all those benefits that Mark already touched on, and how you can sort of, collaborate on files, share files, do all those things internally. What we want to do is help you take that to the external world. I got very passionate with my hands there. I just skipped slides, so apologies. We want to take that to the external world and allow you to actually take that collaboration, that communication outside. So you can make and receive UK, international and mobile calls, even with non-Teams contacts. But as importantly, you can do that securely, cost effectively, and all cloud-based. So for anyone wondering, our solution, which I'll walk you through in a bit more detail shortly, it is a Microsoft approved solution. We do use Microsoft certified SBCs and certified hardware. I'll highlight again some of the few differences on a further slide. We do have sort of simple per user pricing for any of the UK customers, unlimited UK minutes. Some of the big key focuses that I want to mention or highlight on the solution are things like no on-site hardware is required. We do location-based routing, and obviously, of course, we do support ported in numbers from your current solutions. And I'll highlight some of these benefits as I go on. Before I actually dive into the actual solution, I just want to highlight some of the things. I know Mark's touched on some of them, so I might skim some of these on just sort of, the value that a product like Teams can actually bring to your organization. And the first thing that is just sort of highlighting sort of the landscape of the modern workforce. I mean, in particular now, a lot of things have changed for a lot of organizations, but you are seeing, sort of 45% of the modern workforce use social tools for work. And that can kind of touch on sort of how, contact centers can do integration with your social channels and things like that. They do say 4 times as many devices per user. So for anyone that actually is using Teams, just so you know, you can have 8 instances of a Teams application running on a per user basis. So for users that want to do that across a PC, a mobile device, and iPads, I don't know anybody that's actually using 8. Mark would probably be the closest person, I reckon.
I've tried, and actually that's really useful because I only found out that you could do 8 when you mentioned that on the last call. So I've tried.
Right.
I think I've probably got up to about 5, but I'll keep trying.
Yeah,
Must do better.
But yeah, it does allow you obviously that flexibility to span the client across those devices. We are seeing obviously 5 generations in today's workforce, and they did say a previous Microsoft stat was 72% of the relevant workforce will be remote by 2020. I don't think when they made that prediction they obviously expected a global pandemic, which has realistically probably increased that number quite significantly. So and a big one, which kind of touches on the collaboration, is there are 2 times as many teams that exist in the modern workforce as well. So collaboration, in particular in a remote environment, is extremely important. So some of the challenges in supporting that modern workforce, obviously you do see things like advances in technology. They do say that the more modern generation entering the workforce value experience, continued learning, flexibility, collaboration, even over financial compensation to some degree. So keeping widespread teams informed and engaged. Obviously, as we all know, everybody wants their information faster, but it's also about how you centralize and manage that information, how you monitor performance, you satisfy demand for that instant customer service, and you want to obviously maintain reputation and keep things secure. So some of the features and benefits of these types of products, and this one is a massively key one. So we say, obviously, in our sort of more telephony sort of world, when we're talking about, UCaaS products, which is Unified Communications as a Service products, we always class these types of products as a presence-based product. What a presence-based product means is as simple as what you can see on my screen. You can see people's availability, and that is absolutely key in how these products become completely productive and effective. When you can see people's availability and you can choose multiple ways to communicate with individuals, it obviously, naturally increases productivity, collaboration, and overall engagement in an organization. I can simply, at the click of a button, look at people in my team, see if somebody's in a meeting. If I know they're in a meeting, obviously calling them is not the most effective form of communication. You can do things like, start instant messages. You can email people all from one application. You can call them. You can video call them. You can engage people in conferences. All those things are at the click of your fingertips. And a presence-based product is massively valuable to modern day organizations, in particular in remote environments. I mean, previously, before presence-based products existed, you would simply kind of blindly call somebody or blindly email somebody. That can be obviously completely ineffective if someone's out on the road or in meetings or what have you. You want to ensure that not only is it the most effective form of communication, but there's also an audit trail of that communication as well, so things just simply don't get missed. Obviously, Mark's massively touched on this, so I'll just sort of skin over this. But obviously, you do have all the collaboration benefits that exist within Teams. So you are taking not just that communication across your IMs, your instant, your calls, your video calls, but now it's all the same in all your files and all your storage and all in a secure platform, and how all the channels in Teams works, which obviously Mark in his other sessions goes into more detail on. What we're also seeing with these types of products, though, is obviously the financial benefits. Like I mentioned, there's no hardware needed on site to actually enable our Teams Link products. So you are seeing things like limited to no upfront expenses. A lot of organizations are seeing that reduction in operating costs, smarter use of staff resources. It's completely scalable. It can grow up or down with your organization very simplistically. Of course, enhanced security as well. These are some of the key ones that, these are, again, are all sort of Microsoft-based statistics. So, whether you agree or whether you don't agree, it's what Microsoft have found based on some of the studies they've done. But obviously, you are seeing certain benefits in employees' sort of work and life balance when they have the ability to, function and collaborate and work from wherever at times that best suit them. You are seeing sort of, they do say remote workers are less stressed. Remote workers are well connected, and I think anybody using these types of products can easily agree with that. When I myself have been a remote worker for years, obviously when COVID-19 happened, I mean, all I did is just come to my desk like I would at any other normal day. I can still connect with my team. I can still collaborate with everyone. I'm still functioning the exact same way I was previously. They do say remote workers cost less, sickness is reduced. It does open up a wider talent pool as well, because you don't just have to focus on that within mile radius geography of your office. You can open up to a wider talent pool across the country, across the world even. Obviously, it does provide a little bit more choice. They do say companies benefit from happier employees, obviously. They do say remote workers are more engaged, and I think that also relates back to the presence-based element that I mentioned, because they do say, and there's a lot of studies that say, for a remote worker, so for them to feel engaged, they take a more proactive approach to engagement. It's very easy for them to start to collaborate with colleagues that maybe particularly they wouldn't have done if they were in the same office. It's very easy and non-threatening for them to just drop an instant message to somebody and then engage in that collaboration. And obviously, yeah, commuters have lower levels of happiness. I think anybody that has to spend ages on the train would probably agree with that one.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And one thing that occurred to us this week, Mike, just to kind of re-emphasise your first point, the second point about being costing less. Our expenses bill has obviously dropped through the floor since lockdown. So the amount of money we're saving on not travelling, as you say, we're actually more proactive sort of internally to make sure that we have regular updates with each other, but also proactive with the customers. And I think what we found with most of our customers are really comfortable now to jump on a call like we're doing this morning with video, with Teams, and it works really well.
Absolutely. This is just sort of the last slide on the benefits, but we are seeing, obviously, as important to most organizations as well, that you're actually seeing productivity benefits as well. So obviously, reduced travel time. I mean, Mark and I actually have most of our conversations typically anywhere from sort of between 5:30 and 7 in the morning, don't we, Mark? Because of either, with none of us having to travel, both morning people, we're both out on PCs and working at that sort of time. So, it improves that sort of, that reduced travel just improves the ability to work more productively. Of course, improved collaboration. Everything, like I mentioned as well, is recorded and accessible. The nice things about these products is there's an audit trail for everything, so nothing's missed. It's very easy to kind of go back and get messages, retrieve things, see documentation. Everything's there and really, really easy. And then guaranteed uptime, and I'll touch on that as well in the next slide, and actually when I talk about some of the redundancy elements of our solution.
Mike, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Am I allowed to?
Yeah, go for it.
What does telework combing mean?
What do you mean?
Is that meant to say combining services? Sorry, I was just reading your bullets there.
It
Improved
is, yeah,
teleworking,
absolutely.
number 3, combining services into one
combining
platform.
services.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just
I thought it was a new a new buzzword.
Yeah, nice one. Perfect. I don't think there's going to be any questions about that stuff. So am I all right just to sort of jump into the actual Teams link bit? Is that any questions at all before I do?
I think so. Can't see any questions, mate. So yeah, you carry on.
Perfect. All right. So I guess, the real purpose that we're here today, and why I've been asked to sort of speak, is to actually talk about our Teams Link product and how, in particular, that differs from just deploying Microsoft Voice with Microsoft directly. And now, obviously, before anybody worries, as I've already mentioned, it is a Microsoft certified solution. Microsoft do have direct routing available for partners like ourselves within Microsoft Teams. And the reason they do that is because the real reality is, Microsoft obviously support that software element. They support the Teams client. Where they don't really want to get into is that sort of more specialist telephony features and functionality. That's when partners like us can actually really lend our expertise and actually take the product and enhance it. And essentially, that's what Teams Link is really about. So from a very simplistic point of view, just running through some of the very basic things, I just want to cover off some of the differences in the product versus Microsoft directly. As an initial sort of starting point in terms of sort of minutes and what's inclusive, Microsoft does have a limit on their sort of standard call plan of 1,200 minutes. We are unlimited UK, so that's unlimited sort of domestic and mobile calls. There is obviously international options as well. Obviously Microsoft, I'm not sure if anybody knows how that works, but you obviously have to have the calling credits, bill those to credit cards. With our solution, obviously for international minutes, it's just done on a rate card. It's done on your invoice, so you don't have to mess about with that. It's very easy, and it's just a simple telephony bill, like what you would expect. Obviously, both of us support number porting. So if you are looking to deploy Teams as your primary telephony source, we can port in your existing numbers. We do support obviously all the UK DDIs for major cities. A big difference in our solution is we do have local DDIs available in 127 countries versus Microsoft's current 12. So we are a global numbering provider. We do have breakout points in other parts of the world to prevent things like latency. And it does mean that we can actually support local DDIs in all those countries. So we do have many organizations that use our product that are spanned across the globe. We can provide them local DDIs in Germany and in America as an example. So, we can support that infrastructure for all of them. Both, obviously, we do offer things like call queues and ring groups, things that you would expect, auto attendance, music on hold, sort of standard stuff there. Advanced disaster recovery, that's a really, really big one and a really big key difference in our product as well. So Microsoft, as an example, within the UK, solely rely on one major tier 1 carrier. Mind you, it is a good one, but, as we've all seen, tier 1 carriers do every now and again have disasters themselves where things and infrastructure does go down. With our infrastructure, because we hold all your call traffic, we hold all the calling routes, and we hold all your numbers. We also partner with major carriers in the countries that we have breakout points in. So in the UK, we partner with multiple major carriers. So if one major carrier goes down, it does mean that we can route the traffic from our multi-tenant environment over aggregated SIP channels through multiple different providers. So we do have a lot of redundancy and resiliency built into that platform. A lot of people do ask the question, though, does a lot of that still rely on Teams? Of course it does. If Teams does collapse, there can be obviously issues there. The difference with our platform, though, is because we do control all the external traffic, there is options there still. So we can obviously take your call traffic and route that in a different direction to something different for disaster recovery, on top of obviously the resilient solution that I've already mentioned as well, which makes a big difference. It's not an asterisk anymore, but we do actually offer fully MiFID II compliant call recording within Microsoft Teams. I will show you guys that platform in just a moment as well. The nice thing about that as well is because, like I mentioned, we work alongside with Microsoft. We develop against Microsoft's APIs. Microsoft have recently released their policy API that we developed against. So what that means is some of the other providers out there that are doing, Teams direct routing, they can capture and record all that external call traffic, but we can also capture and record the internal Teams call traffic, which actually makes it that more robust and redundant solution as well. So Teams to Teams calls are captured, external calls are captured, and Microsoft are still working on developing that policy API as well. Because in the Scott for Business world, we were also able to capture document transfer and instant messaging. Microsoft are developing that API to allow us and enable us to be able to do that. So hopefully by the end of the year, not only will we be capturing all the call traffic, but we'll also be able to capture your instant messages and everything else that exists in the environment. But it does make it MiFID compliant if we're capturing all the call detail. We do offer in our Pro product skill-based routing, which I'll touch on in a moment. We do some advanced reporting options, and we are in development on quite an advanced solution through Power BI, enabling all various types of analytics. And because we control all that call traffic, we can feed that to you in Power BI, and that the really advanced option should be released by the end of the year. But there is some reporting in the portal now. And then we do have things like supervisor dashboards and contact center wallboards, all of which if there's no questions, I'm just going to jump into the portal and just do a really quick demonstration and then highlight some of these elements that I've just mentioned. Any questions before I do that?
There's nothing in the chat window, mate, so unless
nothing
anybody
in the
wants
chat.
to raise their hand, we'll let Mike just dive into the demo.
I'll just carry on.
Proceed until apprehended.
Yes, excellent. If you guys, is my screen showing still? Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, looks good.
Perfect. So what I first wanted to do is, obviously, one of the biggest questions is, how do you use Teams for calling? So this is the Teams client. Obviously, Mark touched on some of the other elements in Teams. My core focus is this particular tab, this call tab. So importantly to note, we don't make any changes to your Office 365 tenancy. Everything stays the same. You're signing in as normal. You're using your Teams client as normal. Everything we do and the things I'm going to show you is more in the back end. It's for those people that administer IT and the back end services, people that control call routes in an organization. For an individual end user, this is all you're seeing. You're seeing the dial pad. You can obviously start to dial, make a call. There's CRM integration with click to dial. Teams by default has click to dial from email signatures, etc. So as an individual user, it's very simplistic. You can get things like handsets, which we'll touch on. Mark and I will both touch on a little bit later. But it is as simple as obviously dialing a call from your PC if you want, or whatever your device is, and simply making an external call. I did mention that presence-based product, so you do obviously have the ability. So everybody in my organization right now, as an example, can see I'm presenting. If I wanted to, I could set an actual status message. I could say, presenting a webinar so people can actually see that. But you do get obviously the option to sort of, enhance your availability and your presence. The nice thing about Teams as a product is that presence does pull from synchronization your Outlook calendar. So if I have a meeting in my Outlook calendar, as an example, it does change my status by default if I want it to. So you have the ability to control your ways that you communicate within the organization. The reason I wanted to show you the Teams client as well is just in particular touching on the call tab. So products like this and a presence-based product and a more modern sort of UCaaS solution as well, you do get away from those historic PBX solutions where you have an extension number for people. Currently, every user becomes a user. If I need to transfer a call to somebody in my organization, I'm not looking at an extension call list. I'm actually searching for that individual by name, which does mean that everybody in the organization has a DDI. If that's concerning to everyone, I'll show you in the portal how you can change and what outbound number you present. But every user does get assigned a DDI, and that DDI is associated with that person by name. So it does mean that users through Teams can control their own individual call traffic. So I can have my calls ring me, but also ring. So this will ring my Teams client. I could put a new number or contact in there, so I could put my mobile number as an example if I wanted that to ring my mobile number and I didn't want to use the Teams app. Maybe I trusted the mobile network more. I could do that, or I can actually have my calls ring me and ring a contact, ring someone else, ring nobody else, or actually ring an actual call group. So I could have a group of users. Obviously, I sit in the channel sort of wholesale team. If I wanted all my calls to ring me as well as ring my team, I could do that. So you can do that from here, as well as the same option, but to forward your calls. So, if someone calls my DDI, I could just forward it directly to a voicemail. Again, forward that to my mobile number, forward that to a contact, or just forward my calls to a call group. If I was on annual leave, perhaps, and I didn't want any of my calls missed, I could do that. So you have the option to actually configure some of your own call routing elements yourself within Teams, which is really nice for a lot of the end users.
Yeah, the other one option that's not on there because you probably haven't set any is you can actually set delegates as well.
Yeah,
so
I haven't set any yet.
Like a manager secretary type working or a small team that you want somebody else to be able to pick your calls up, you can. But you have to set the delegates first, and then it gives you the option to do it. Sorry, man.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, spot on. So I'll just quickly sort of breeze through these two elements because obviously I'm conscious of time, but I just wanted to sort of highlight, as I mentioned, any of your end users are using Teams as a client. Everything that we're doing is all in the back end. And through the back end portal, for anyone that's tried to administer it through Microsoft directly, you will find some advantages in our product and how you actually control your ecosystem in the back end. So what you'll see here on the main sort of home screen of the portal when you logged in, you would see a calculation of live call charges. So if, you know, obviously, as I mentioned, sort of your UK domestic calls are included. Here's where you'd see things like premium rate charges or international calls, but it does allow you just a really quick tally to monitor those call charges. And then obviously, if you needed to drill down into detail, you could do that through some of the reports. You do also have the option to check the operational health of the system. I did mention some of the other breakout points we have. As an example, Australia is one of them. So you can actually check, obviously, the presence and the operational health of the solution. And if there's any incidences, you can just check all of that. But everything's good to go at the moment, which you would hope when you're doing a demo. The next thing is there's a few different things you can do within the portal. Some of these things are a little bit more complex in the Microsoft arena. In particular, this tab here, sometimes this does involve a little bit of PowerShell, but you can get a really quick snapshot of peer-to-peer activity in the organization. Just to pull up any of the calls that are taking place in the organization, to, from, to, and date stamp them all. The nice thing is when the policy API from Microsoft gets updated, this is also going to show you your instant message traffic and your document collaboration and sharing. The nice thing about that is it does allow you from a sort of a GDPR compliant element, or even just simple HR, if you can see if any documents are leaving the organization, as an example, or it just gives you a really quick snapshot of activity, which is important to some organizations. And you can do the same for conferences. And all of this information can be exported should you want it to. The setup tab is kind of the key tab and kind of the brains behind the entire solution. This is where you can control all the elements of a phone system that you'd expect to be able to control. So starting with things like simply like a dial policy. If you wanted to sort of restrict users from dialing certain locations, you can obviously set the dial policies for the organization here. So you have the ability to do that. I mentioned being able to mask your outbound CLI. So I myself, I manage the channel for sort of the UK and Australia. So I do calls in Australia as well. When I'm making outbound calls for Australia, I can present my Australian CLI. But this also makes a change for, as I mentioned before, every user has a DDI, but you might not want those users presenting that DDI for outbound calls. So this is where you can change what outbound number they present if you want them to present their main number. So you can very simplistically control that from the portal. You can control your user access and your security groups of individuals. So you might want certain people having access to certain elements of the portal. You can do that through here as well. You can control things like your media. This will be for all of your sort of your MP3s and your WAV files, for any of your IVRs, your audio attendants, or your voicemails. You have the ability to very simplistically upload those and have them on here and load them into your call route as and when you need to. Voicemail is another big one. So we actually have group voicemail in the product, which is something that Microsoft directly don't offer for anybody on the call that's kind of set up Microsoft calling. This is a kind of a common problem with Teams, unfortunately. If you have a bunch of users in a ring group and someone's calling that ring group and nobody answers, calls do terminate on personal voicemails. So because we offer group voicemail as an option, you can turn off that voicemail and those ring group users can actually terminate on a group voicemail. So you can have a whole bunch of users in that group and they all get a notification that there's been a voicemail left. And that's another very, very big difference. For a lot of organizations that have a lot of call traffic, that's actually quite a key requirement, believe it or not. So that's quite an important one. You can obviously monitor all your users, all your numbers, etc. Basic stuff you'd expect to see. Importantly, you can also obviously create users and spin up users really, really quickly. If I started typing my name as a user in there, you can manually create a user really quickly. You can choose the domain that you want them assigned to. So if you're an organization that manages multiple domains, you can manage multiple domains through the portal. I can select the license I want to assign to that user. I can assign them the phone number straight away. I can add them to contact center if I want. Once the information's filled in though, I simply create that user and you're instantly spinning up a user to be able to use Teams telephony calling for external and assigning that number straight away. So it's very, very easy to spin up yourself, especially if you're using things like, most of us are. We're all using our PCs with headsets. You're not having to wait on hardware or getting things provisioned. It's very simple to sort of set up a user and spin them up really, really quickly. Again, I'm just conscious of time, so I'll continue to sort of breeze through this. One of the big differences in our product, and again, for anyone that's used the Microsoft environment, is we do have a visual call routing manager. Mark, do I need to zoom that in? I know sometimes I need to zoom this in. Does that look all right on screen?
No, it looks fine on my end, mate, to be honest. Yeah, carry on.
Perfect. All right. So even the most untechnical of people can get a view of sort of how this works. But you can set up your own call routes in the portal, and it's very easy and very visual. You can see that if you call this number, if it's routed in hours, it'll have a time condition on it. So this one in particular is Monday to Friday, 7 to 6. The call routes this direction. It hits a main menu, hits the IVR, press 1 for sales, press 2 for support. You press 2 for support, it hits another IVR with all the various differences. So you can see how easy and how visual this is to set up your own call routes. And it is simple as going into the create a call route tab. You select a DDI. This will put up the range of DDIs that are available in the organization, and it's just a click through process. Now, I mentioned the redundancy of the solution earlier on as well. The nice thing about this environment is you can actually template your disaster recovery models as well. So if you want to run a whole bunch of templates for if a building needs to be evacuated, if we're in the situation we're in now, where one day everyone's working in the office, the next day everyone's working from home, you can log into the portal and instantly make those changes to all your call routes, and it's immediate and it's straight away. But you can obviously template all different modes if you want, and all you have to do is just click on that call route to bring it live and assign it to the right number. So it's very, very easy, but it is just simply a click through process. If I want to start by adding that time condition I mentioned, it's just simply Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. You can set certain criteria for certain holidays. So by default on those holidays, calls route in a certain direction. It is as simple as just clicking through everything and adding the various elements, adding your IVR as an example. You choose the recording, you give it a name, you pressed all the various different options, 1, 2, 3. It's just a click through process. One of the things I did mention is one of the differences is we do have the call queues, which is skill-based routing in the product as well. So there's 2 different things you can add to a ring group in terms of the users that the calls terminate to. One is a ring group. Within a ring group, it's as simple as exactly what you'd expect. Every user in this group, as an example, you can set the ring time you want it to ring for. It means all these users, the calls ring them all at the same time for that amount of time. Whoever picks it up first, they've answered the call. Simple as that. So you can add those to a call route. But what we also have in our Pro product is what's called a call queue. And in a call queue, you have things like skill-based routing. So you can see, as an example, you can rank your agents from 0 to 100. The higher the skill level, those agents take the call first. We do have a native smart agent selection back-end system built into the product that obviously helps enable where the calls are routed. So if you have a whole bunch of users on the same skill level, it by default rings to the person that's been most idle the longest. But it does just give you a little bit of that control. If you have sort of very basic contact center requirements, perhaps you run a service desk. I mean, RISC is an example. They use this for their service desk to route, where they want particular calls to go. So, their higher skilled engineers take certain queries as an example. So it just gives you that flexibility, and that's a bit of uniqueness to the product. So we do have that built in. Just moving on from that, there's a few things that you can do as well. I did mention some of the reports you can do. So you can run some very basic sort of reports out of the portal straight away. Things that you'd expect: missed call reports, outbound call detail records. So if you want to pull up any of the outbound call details, any of the call summaries, who's been on calls, etc., etc. And you can get into some more advanced detail when I run into sort of the contact center element. So this is where you can actually get details on the queues that you have. Maybe you're running a particular marketing campaign. This will give you a summary of all of that. You can do the same for particular agents and for particular people. And in this tab is where we also have a few other things. So you'll see things like a supervisor dashboard. This obviously highlights, any of the call routes that are coming in. If somebody makes a call now, you'll actually see that call live and you can see it cycle through agents. You can manage multiple sort of queues as well. If I wanted to just be a supervisor for sales, I can see who's in there. I could take Barry as an example. I could set him to busy. I could log him out. I could start a break for him. You just have the ability to sort of manage some of the call routes and see what your agents are up to. And this is very, very key, especially in the situation we're in now. A supervisor could view all the calls and who's taking what from a remote location on all their agents in the call queues. And even still support things like your live and active wallboards. If they wanted to, have all these stats available to them on screens and on wallboards, you actually do have the ability to pop this stuff up on wallboards. Just quickly before I kind of move into the next bit, I did mention again, just because I'm conscious of time, I know I'm going quite long here. Is we do have obviously call recording, and that's quite unique to us with all the elements that we can capture. In the back-end call recording platform, it is exactly sort of what you'd expect. Again, you can restrict access to this. You can restrict all various types of access, but the call recording back-end does capture all the levels of detail you'd want. And again, like I said, there's all various different elements to this. I'll just cover some of the basic stuff. You can obviously search for intervals for specific date ranges. You can search by number, from or to. You can search by specific users if you wanted to. So you could pull up the users that you wanted in the organization and search by them by a specific user. So you can pull all that information up. And you can obviously see a log of all the calls that have taken place. There's all various things you can do with that. You can copy the URL if perhaps maybe you need to send that to somebody. You need to send that to somebody in HR, a solicitor, what have you. You can export the information. You can obviously simply start to play your recordings as well, which will pop up, the play tab, and you'll be able to obviously live listen to the recordings and be able to obviously listen to them, export elements of them, and do anything that you want with the recording. So you just get a quick sort of highlight, and you can see obviously all the elements of the recording platform. Search particular calls. In a conference, as an example, it'll give you metadata markers for when certain people join the call. You have all those options. There is even things like transcription services that are becoming available as well. It works very well in our sort of Skype for Business world, and that's transitioning onto Teams, which enables you to do things like text search. So you can actually enter particular phrases, search particular phrases, certain words, all those things you want. You have the ability to search all that from the call recording platform. This is a really quick skim. I can obviously, if anybody wants any more follow-up, and we can go into a lot more detail. I'm just conscious I've run over a little bit. So I will.
No, you're fine, Mike. I was just going to say,
in case I forget
to mention it later. Obviously, the key difference here is that the Wavenet product gives you the ability to basically record every conversation across the business. Absolutely. So for compliance industries, so MiFID compliance in particular, it's great for that. Obviously, Teams itself has its own recording ability. Obviously, we're recording this call, but that's a manual process. So you can only record, and you can also only record multi-party conversations. So you can't record a one-to-one conversation in Teams, even if you try and instigate it. You can only do if it's more than two people on a call.
Yeah, absolutely. This is what's called always on recording as well. So there's nothing you manually have to do. It's all there, and it's recorded by default and all fully supported. So I think I'll probably pass back to you then, Mark.
Yeah, I think you're all right. If you want to finish anything else off, I know you've kind of covered the call recording, haven't you?
Yeah.
Is that the last bit you were going to cover?
We can move on to devices. I was going to cover that as well.
Carry on. You're right for 5 or 10 minutes.
No worries. Perfect. Share that screen back again. Yeah, perfect. So hopefully that covered some stuff. One of the next things that I know Mark will probably touch on that a little bit as well, is obviously we do support all various different types of elements. There's certified devices that exist out there for Teams, and we can see all various different ranges of things that work for certain individuals. Anything from headsets are obviously very, very common in the world now. We do have a range of handsets that are available and natively support Teams as well. But in particular, when we all start getting back into them, offices. So, we did touch on obviously the ability and how Teams is not just that, that basic solution. It is a full conference solution as well. So, for these types of calls that we're doing now, you can transition those into room solutions. You know, you can see at the very bottom as an example, there's like the Yealink MVC 500 there, where it does give you that tablet that sits on the desk. You can just walk into a room, invite that room into a Teams meeting, click join, and have that collaboration with the TV that's in the room, the cameras that are there, the microphones, all those things. So you can transition Teams into full conference room solutions in a very effective and easy manner, and we can obviously help you with that as well. Just keen to just sort of highlight that for anybody that's exploring maybe Teams as an option, but also thinking that they need to get a different conferencing solution. Absolutely not. It's full collaboration in one thing. If you have the audio dialing conferencing license assigned to users, they do get the dial-in functionality across Teams, so people can join in from a mobile device or a landline if they don't have access to a PC. So it does support every element completely and entirely.
Yeah, that's exactly the one that we've got, Mike. Just thinking about it, I was just thinking actually we've got that whole exact room system downstairs in our boardroom, which is a shame because there's only me here. It seems a little bit over the top using it, but yeah, like you said, when we get back to the offices, these are really important. These Teams room systems, again, as part of the evolution of the Teams product, Microsoft have put a lot of effort into making sure that works really well, and working closely with manufacturers like particularly Yealink and Poly, as they're called now, and Jabra. So some of the devices that they've got now are work really well.
Absolutely. The only sort of last bit I wanted to kind of touch on was the project management element. I know this slide can be maybe slightly confusing, but to be honest, we do this on a regular basis. We work with the guys at RISC, and we have an entire provisioning team, and we do these migrations constantly. We use a solution, and the reason I've put this up there is just kind of because it kind of screenshots it. I've been in the telecommunications industry for a very, very long time, and it wasn't till I joined VIA that I was like, wow, this is actually brilliant, because it's the most simplistic thing, but it just really helps keep tabs on a project deployment. It's essentially, we give you access, as well as anybody else that needs access, to what's called a process street link, and that just basically pulls up this, and it gives you a master checklist of everything that needs to take place with the project. There's notes that can be assigned to every task, and you can just watch them get checked off. It highlights the areas of responsibility. It gives everybody access to how the project's going, what anything that's remaining or outstanding before you completely go live. It's just a really simplistic way to manage it, and we've done thousands of deployments now. And we have a very, very finite process. So in conjunction with deploying through RISC and our project team, it's just sort of highlighting that you're in very safe hands there. And that is actually finally it from me, Mark. So it is back to you now.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Yeah, and I'd second that. You're in safe hands. We've got a customer going live on Friday, actually, funnily enough. So yeah, it's we've deployed a lot of customers with Wavenet. So have you've unshared. Any questions immediately spring to mind for Mike? I will just share my my screen with you as we go through. I'm not sure what that's doing on there. Just bear with me a second. Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. I was just interestingly, I'd scribbled down while you were talking actually why we recommend the sort of Wavenet product as opposed to just taking Microsoft's out of the box, as well as the obvious things that you talked about there. I think fundamentally the product has got better SLAs, it's got better service levels, it's got more features, more flexibility, particularly around pricing packages. It's actually more mature. I think your voice platform, obviously because it's come from the Skype for Business legacy platform, is more mature. And it's a hell of a lot easier to set up, as you say, going through that drag and drop call setup compared to trying to create call queues in the native Microsoft portal. It's like night and day, to be honest. So have you got can you see my slide again there?
Yeah, all good my end, yeah.
Okay. So there's no immediate questions. I'll kind of push on, and then obviously we can pause and stop the recording, and then wrap up any questions that you've got for either of us towards the end. So I think, as Mike said, he's covered a lot of the Teams calling side of things. I just really wanted to sort of wrap up just sort of focusing on Teams itself. So I think, you know, the beauty, if you compare it to, obviously there are a lot of people on this call that don't know what you're currently using. As Mike said, as a business, we use obviously use the Wavenet product as you'd expect to manage our both sales desk and technical help desk as well. And I've got a little screenshot to show you what that looks like in reality. But I think the beauty of Teams, as well as all the devices that Mike talked about, is you can use it and it's the same product virtually, whether you're using it on the Windows desktop, on an iPad, actually using a web browser, a Mac, iPhone, Android devices, then you've got access to the same functionality. So if you enable a user with voice through Wavenet, for example, and they get that dial pad, you'll get that dial pad whichever device you're on. So you can soon run up 3, 4, 5 devices, as I've done, not quite 8 at a time, but yeah, multiple devices. And just reiterating Mike's point around the devices, as you'll see, again, Microsoft have put a lot of work into this. A lot of these devices are what we use in-house. So the Yealink phones, I mean, 90% of us use headsets, to be honest. As you see, the one I'm sporting now makes me look a bit like a Cyberman, but the quality of it is brilliant. Some people prefer handsets, and again, Yealink particularly have done a great job of building what is effectively an Android device that looks like a phone. So it's an Android screen on there. So we use, and a lot of our customers use these handsets where they're needed. But in generally, because A, they're cheaper, and B, they're more flexible, a lot of people are happy to use headsets now with Windows machines.
Mark, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Got a question from Dominic Smith, who's asked, is the contact center telephony based only, or would it support queries via email and website chat windows comms too, so that agents receive queries from other comms channels? We run a box office and have queries from various sources.
Right, so that's a kind of multi-platform contact center environment from the sounds of it. Mike, I'm going to push that one back to you, I'm afraid.
Yeah, so I mean, what I demonstrated today, the answer to that is no. And the reason for that is obviously what we've built into the platform is basic contact center features. Now, what we do offer, though, is there is advanced contact center solutions that, you know, obviously specialize in the omni-channel and the multi-channel worlds. And every advanced contact center solution we use, it does obviously have what's called PSTN pairing. So it does mean that obviously you can still have Teams as the single source client, but there is obviously the ability to obviously integrate with more advanced contact center solutions. So we can do that. Absolutely, we can deliver that. You know, further to this call, we can have a conversation and walk you through that. But yeah, no, I haven't done a piece on the advanced contact center today, but yeah, we do have the ability to offer omni-channel integrated into Teams.
Yeah, we can certainly take that offline. So Sean, I think the short answer is yes. I think the longer answer is yes, but would need to look at the environment and how we integrate into that environment. So not out of the box, but yeah, it can be supported from what you're saying there, Mike.
Absolutely. Yep.
That's brilliant. Thanks, guys. Dominic says he'll take it offline with you after this webinar.
Perfect.
Also, I saw Tanvir Channa, you had your hand raised, so just wondering if you still got a question. Feel free to take yourself off mute.
Yeah, hi there. I was just sort of wondering, you know, moving all of your eggs into one basket, moving from, say, if you're using one system at the moment or multiple systems for your back office and then for your call center, how would that impact, you know, in terms of redundancy? What redundancy would you have if there are sort of communication issues you're having to this system?
Shall I go first, Mike, and you can just add?
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, I think, putting your eggs in one basket is, you know, I guess, you know, a consideration. I think that certainly in terms of the resiliency, so I guess you've got two elements. You've got the sort of back-end cloud, so both the Microsoft Office 365 cloud and obviously Wavenet's cloud as part of that. You know, and that is resilient, and we've got SLAs around that. At the end of the day, you are relying on Microsoft keeping their Teams cloud up and running, which touch wood has been pretty robust, even over the last few months with the increase in demand on it. Certainly on the Wavenet side, we've been using the Wavenet platform using Skype for Business as a client previously, and then obviously more recently Teams, but it's the same back-end system. We've not experienced any outage in close to 2 years, to be honest. We had a blip with some single sign-on issue with Microsoft, but in terms of the Wavenet platform itself is very resilient. The SLAs around that are great. And then obviously you've got the other end, the user end, in terms of connecting. So there are some considerations there. Obviously, if you're relying on IP connectivity from your offices to deliver your voice, you need to, consider the resilience of that. Obviously, if you've got people flexibly working from home, potentially they can take calls on 4G. So, if you've got a Teams client, if you lose the internet connectivity in the office, then you've still got the Teams client running on your mobile. If it flicks to 4G, for example, you can make and receive calls in exactly the same way. So from that point of view, yes, there are some considerations, but I would say if you're going to put your eggs in one basket, this is a good place to be.
Thank you.
But we can certainly help you on in terms of starting off with a checklist of things to consider if you're deploying it.
Okay,
absolutely. Okay, no problem. Okay, so I just need to get my slide back up. Sean, shall I just carry on?
Even so apprehended, Mark.
Okay.
Let's go.
Will do then, mate. Will do. Yeah, I know Mike covered this, and I know this is a busy sort of diagram, but just very, very quickly, just talking about RISC ourselves. So this is how we're set up. So just to emphasise the simplicity of this call delivery platform, and actually, this didn't change when we moved from Skype for Business as a client to Teams as a client. None of this changed. We just changed the way that we were licensed and how we were answering the calls. But in terms of when you call our office, and just ignore that number at the top because this is just a demo copy of our live environment. But if you call our office, you'll get exactly this. So in working hours, you'll get the main interactive voice response system, one for sales. I don't know why sales is more important than technical support, but there you go. We might need to change that. One for sales, two for support, 3, 4, 5, etc. And then obviously out of hours, and that just sits in the background and works. So at whatever time the out of hours kicks in, it flicks into the second route. And as I say, that's been bulletproof for the last 2 years. All we've done really is change the way that we as end users answer those calls by moving from Skype for Business as that declines into Teams. And as Mike said, there's a mixture there of time of day, interactive voice response, ring groups, call queues, and voicemails that we use. So that's just re-emphasizing that. In terms of, I'm not going to go through another Teams demo. This session is really about calling and telephony and the Wavenet solution rather than Teams itself. We do run some other sessions just on the wider Teams application and how that works and how you can use Teams. So we can cover that in a second. But in terms of the constant innovation that Microsoft are pushing down, obviously, once you move to Teams as your unified communications platform, then you are going to be getting all of this innovation pushed down the line from Microsoft. Obviously, with the current situation with COVID, with the demand from users for Microsoft to deliver features that can compete with products like Zoom, then they've accelerated their development cycle and actually prioritized Teams as development above everything else at the moment. So things like pop-out chat. So if you currently use Skype for Business or if you've ever used Skype for Business, some of the features in there are a little bit slicker. So you can pop out chats, you can actually pop out calls in Skype. You can't pop out calls yet in Teams, but you can pop out chats, and that ability to have multiple windows in the Teams app is coming in the next few months. Live captions and subtitles. I could have told you this at the beginning, but you could switch on live captioning at your end if you want to hear or get what we're saying translated. Obviously, the recording that we'll send can also have live captioning within it as well. So when I record this meeting in Teams, it actually saves it in something called Stream, which if you use Office 365, you have access to Stream, which is their call recording platform, and that comes with the transcription as well, where you can view particular search for words and view particular times in the session. So at the moment, that live captioning is only US English. There are plans to develop that to be multilingual. So effectively, you could be delivering a Teams meeting to multiple countries in multiple languages, and it will obviously translate it on the fly for you. This 3x3 background is fairly new, so the ability to have 9 live video feeds is fairly new, and obviously the custom backgrounds, you'll see some of the crew there from RISC IT with their custom backgrounds, so you can actually change the background that you see. Microsoft have announced that they're already previewing 7x7, so that will actually, I think, match Zoom or potentially leapfrog Zoom in terms of the number of live video feeds, and that's being pushed out primarily for education actually, but it will be available in the consumer product as well. So thinking about classrooms and teachers delivering sessions to classrooms, and they need that multiple 7x7 live video feed. And there's also lots of innovation coming from Microsoft's partners, and obviously, as you'd expect, I'll pick on Wavenet here. So things like the call recording, the MiFID II compliant call recording that Wavenet are delivering off the top of the product, that will, never say never, but that will unlikely be ever delivered by Microsoft themselves. They'll always rely on partners to deliver some of that additional innovation around Teams. So Wavenet used to have a tagline called "A great product made better" when they looked, Scott, and I think that's exactly what they're doing with Teams. So taking the bulk of what Teams does, which is great, out of the box, and then just making it better with some of the services that they provide. And just to kind of finish on that sort of innovation and roadmap point, and again, apologies for those of you that have been on one of my sessions before, we'll have covered this off, but just to emphasize just how much has changed in Teams since March. So this bullet point list I put up in March, which was all the things that were on the roadmap to come into Teams. As you can see, the ones that have crossed through have already been delivered. So the multi-window chat has been partly delivered. So things like the ability to have everything that you currently have in Outlook within Teams. So at the moment, you can obviously have your Teams calendar, or your Teams calendar is in there, and is exactly the same as Outlook. But what you can't do is have things like multiple calendars, open other people's calendars, and there's also no email or no inbox in Teams at the moment, but that's coming down the line as well. And the other one I'll pick on, I think, offline support. So at the moment, you can't run Teams offline. You need an internet connection. So you can't, for example, if you're on the train, not that many of us are traveling on trains at the moment, but if you're on a train and you want to compose messages or chats offline, you can't do that currently. Again, that's coming. And again, the compliance-based Teams recording, which relied on the Microsoft API at the Microsoft end, that was waiting for that to be released, and that was released about a month ago. So again, partners like Wavenet can now bolt in their products like call recording into Teams as well. So yeah, there's a rapid change, all for the better. Some of these features that people have been waiting for that maybe were in Skype for Business already and haven't appeared in Teams yet are coming down the line very, very quickly. You can actually check the roadmap out yourself if you want. There's a little short link there when Sean shares the collateral from today. We'll obviously share the slides and any useful links with you as well on that portal. So this is you can access the Teams roadmap yourself. So this will tell you what's just been released, what's in the process of being rolled out, and then obviously what's in development and what's been committed by Microsoft to deliver. Outside of that, there are some other things, and they run something called user voice, so you can actually vote on features that you want to see in Teams, and they do actually take notice of that. And once it reaches a certain level, then they'll start to consider bringing it into the product. So this is all the stuff that they're committed to do. So will happen at some point. And then outside of that, as I say, the user voice is quite a useful thing to keep your eyes on, which is if you've got particular features that you want to see in Teams, you can vote on that. So finally, in terms of what we do and how we can help you with this wider Teams deployment. So obviously the voice side in particular, as I mentioned, we've got a number of customers live using Teams as their sole telephony platform, and we've got a couple of case studies that we can share with you if you're interested to see what we've been doing for those guys. One of the customers who are happy to be referenced, so Alzheimer's UK, the charity, they rolled out Teams voice to 220 users literally 3 days before lockdown came in. So in terms of timing, that was great. So it enabled them to effectively send all their people home, but actually continue seamlessly. So obviously if you call one of their main numbers or their donation lines, it will reach that same team, even though they're remote now, working from home, working from wherever they wherever they are currently. So that was a recent one we did alongside Wavenet. And I say we've got a number of customers going live this month. We're a Microsoft Gold partner, so I think the end-to-end solution design, deployment, and support is important. So we can pull together the whole solution. So support you on the Microsoft side, support you on the Wavenet side. We're a single point of contact, and obviously we've got that sort of background, track record, and credibility with Microsoft. Reference customers I've talked about. We have this Teams fast track engagement that we run, so we can kind of crunch down the amount of time it takes you to deploy. So things like end user training, so things like Teams voice is all built into that fast track engagement. And we're also offering, so for those of you that attended today or attended one of the other end user training sessions, we're offering a 30-day proof of concept free of charge for up to 25 users. Actually, it doesn't say it there, but there's a limit on that of 25 users licensing. So we will get that set up and running and numbers allocated for you to test Teams voice if that's something you're interested in. Good timing. So I didn't want to spend too much time going over the same ground that Mike went over. So hopefully that's given you a good insight into sort of Teams itself, where it is currently, where it's going in terms of the roadmap, obviously where and how you can enable Teams for voice with ourselves and Wavenet, and the benefits that you can see from that. Clearly, as Mike mentioned, I think the project management side of it is kind of is undervalued sometimes. I think the service that Wavenet provide to make sure that customers, particularly when you're migrating telephone numbers over from a legacy system to a new system, can be fraught with danger, to say the least. So having somebody on point to manage that for you and make sure that runs smoothly is fantastic. So that's touch wood. That's all worked seamlessly for us so far and for our customers. So the number porting side is a big stress factor if you're moving systems.